a fantastic week in Leeds, full stop.
And I think Ben Stokes rolled his sleeves up and recognised that he had to drag them back in the game.
He is kind of the player who is most kind of, Bazballian in terms of his whole approach.
He was about to go on an England tour and he was dressed as a character from the Game of Thrones.
He's got it in the locker now, which makes him so much more difficult to bowl to, and I'm sure at some stage in this series he will do that, probably in a first innings, and then India are going to have an even bigger headache.
I can't see this top seven changing, barring injury.
I think there's more to come from Pope in this series.
Has Bazball grown up?
He's got a job on his hands to turn this into a team and not a collection of individuals.
Hi, Stuart Broad here. I hope you're enjoying a great summer. I'm here with Laithwaite's Wine, the proud sponsor of the Telegraph's cricket podcast. Check out my Beyond the Wicket range of wines at Laithwaite's, inspired by my memories travelling the world playing this incredible sport we love. Visit laithwaites.co.uk for more details.
Hello and welcome back to the Telegraph Cricket Podcast. I am your host, Jake Goodwill, and I'm joined once again by the Telegraph's chief cricket correspondent, Nick Holt. Hello, Nick.
Morning.
And by our cricket news correspondent, Will McPherson. Hello, Will.
Morning, Jake. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Very well. Now, most importantly, another stunning chase by this England side against India at Headingley. This was England's second highest run chase ever, only beaten by another effort under this regime. What did you guys make of it from the ground?
It was a fantastic week in Leeds, full stop. I know, Jake, you've been eating herring and sat in saunas and floating up and down the fjords, but I'm sure you found time to listen to TMS or watch it. But we were very lucky to be there this week. Actually, it was a long week, deep into day 5. Just around 6:30 p.m. it finished last night. But it was a classic Test match, wasn't it? It was kind of India dominated so much of it, and yet England then produced this incredibly controlled, really quite calm chase. One of their best wins under Bazball, but probably says a lot about how good they've been in this regime. But I wouldn't say it was outright the best one, but it was a remarkable game. India will be on the way to Birmingham today, wondering how on earth they've managed to lose that game. They've also got some big problems. Bumrah is only going to play 3 games of this series, we think. So he's played one of them. They're sticking by that. So yeah, they'll be wondering how they're 1-0 down. And it does actually suddenly feel quite a long way back for them.
I think from afar, one of the things that was interesting was that the confidence that England could chase that down felt very kind of palpable. And a few years ago, that would have just been an absolute non-starter. But it just felt like there was a lot of belief, not just from within the England camp, but from the fans, from everyone, that it was a possibility they could do it. And that ultimately proved to be right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that was the feeling at the close of play on day 1, they just chase it down with real sort of maturity and calmness. There was no feeling that they were going to blow it at any stage. It felt very controlled, and that was down to the confidence that they have doing that role. They love to chase. They know Headingley very well, and also they've got a lot of very positive recent history there to draw on. So you could really tell that they felt in command, even though they were facing Bumrah, because he was the sort of unknown factor that the statistics and everything else can't help you control. So yeah, it was. I'd put it up there as probably their second best chase, and it's a pretty long list for this regime, and I suspect it's going to get longer very soon too.
And before we get into breaking it down in slightly more detail, if I could have one highlight from the test from both of you.
I'd say my highlight from the test match would be the performance of Ollie Pope. I thought that having been critical of him batting at number 3 for England in this series, he came out and he batted probably played the best innings I would say he's ever played. I know there's the 196 at Hyderabad, and that was a real statement from him. But I felt that here he was under a lot of pressure for his place because of Bethel, and he came out and he batted. He batted as if he'd never had any issues and nobody was pushing him for that place. And so that was a highlight for me, and that's probably locked in that top 7 now for the Ashes.
Yeah, my highlight was probably the second evening, that kind of crazy passage where Joe Root got out to Bumrah, 10th time in Test cricket that's happened. Harry Brook came out, it's the first time he's playing against India, and it was just a slightly kind of crazed passage where Bumrah kept bowling no balls and then got Brook out with a no ball, and then the next day Brook goes and bats so well, but kind of felt, I don't know, it wouldn't have felt quite right if he'd got 100, and the 99 felt weirdly appropriate actually, and so that's it. It was just such a dramatic end to a day's cricket. I didn't envy Nick that evening writing the kind of main report piece on the whistle, because just so much happened in the last half hour, and if Bumrah had kept his foot behind the line, it's really hard to see how England win that game from there. That was probably my highlight of the Test. It was just such a staggering period of drama, and a reminder that as brilliant as Bumrah is, he still has these kind of slightly fallible moments, and he does have a bit of a no-ball problem, and Headingley does that to bowlers as well, especially running down that hill. It's all a bit awkward. So, yeah, kind of unique characteristics of the ground, and just a staggering period of drama, it was great fun.
Great. Well, look, let's get into it in a bit more detail, and it feels like it is only right to start with Ben Duckett. I mean, that was some innings there. I mean, I think it's obviously been levelled at Duckett a slight criticism that he gets starts, gets 50s, doesn't go on to convert big hundreds, maybe hundreds in crucial moments. So for him to score like that in that moment just feels like an absolutely huge moment for him as a cricketer. And Michael Vaughan's written a column for us saying he's the best batsman in all formats at the moment, which I know something you've written for a while, Will, that you think across T20, ODI and Test that you think he's kind of right up there. But what was it like watching that innings firsthand?
It was a brilliant innings. I think what impressed me most about Duckett was the way he actually went down the gears. There was nothing felt outrageous about what he was doing. He really picked his targets. He recognised, and Zach Crawley deserves credit here as well, but he recognised that the fourth evening required respect. They only ended up facing 6 overs. If the over rate had been slightly better, that might have been 8. It probably should have been 8. But they ran the clock down, and they recognised it was an important period in the game, and they were just really sensible. He left his first 2 balls, which is kind of it's noteworthy. It shouldn't be noteworthy about an opener, but he left his first 2 balls, and then he the final morning as well. He was respectful to Bumrah. He realised whenever Bumrah came back into the attack exactly how he was trying to get him out. He did a lot of media after the game last night. I spoke to him, and he said that he learnt a lot from the innings in Hyderabad in the first Test last year, where he played on to Bumrah bowling reverse swing, and that happened in the first innings here. It wasn't reverse swing, but he played on to Bumrah, and Bumrah had been brought back into the attack to get him out, and he did it. And in the fourth innings of the game, he had the smarts, he had the brains to work out that was what was going on again. Every time Bumrah was brought back on, they were trying to get him out. I know that sounds extremely obvious, but there are other bowlers who Duckett doesn't have any problem with in this India attack, and so he took them on. I thought it was a really smart knock. I thought it was one of his and Zach Crawley's best partnerships, actually. Some of those partnerships they've had. I mean, people will remember the Rawalpindi one on the Duckett's first day back in Test cricket when they both got hundreds. That was on such a flat pitch on the opening day. This one, I think, was their best one. It wasn't their biggest, but yeah, it was just. England couldn't. You mentioned the Vaughan column. He mentioned this in that, but they couldn't lose the game on the fourth evening, or even on the fifth. Sorry, they couldn't win the game on the fourth evening, or even the fifth morning. But they could lose it in that period, and Crawley and Duckett really recognised that, and just made sure they got through. Crawley was striking at kind of 45, which is totally anathema to the way he instinctively plays the game. But they just recognised the situation and built and laid a platform for England to win. It was a shame Duckett couldn't bring it home. It looked like he was going to. It was one of those moments when he got out yesterday for 149 where there was just a slightly stunned silence, partly because Shardul Thakur had stunk the game out completely, and it was sort of brought back on just to kind of fill some overs up. And Duckett managed to slap him to cover him. Amazingly, got Brookneck's ball as well with a filthy ball down the leg side. But yeah, it was a kind of stunned moment from a decent crowd yesterday. But it was it was a brilliant innings. I'm very pleased for him. I think he's kind of done it the hard way in international cricket. He had to wait a long time. And what's nice is you mentioned that he was someone who has left quite a few hundreds out there across the formats. Actually, even as recently as earlier this month, he left. He could have. It was a T20 hundred in his grasp at Southampton, and he managed to not get it. But it's a nice problem to have, getting to 50 a lot, getting to 70 a lot, and then not getting to 100. He's got a ceiling to smash now, and I sense this start to the Test summer with a big, very easy looking 100 against Zimbabwe, a 60 odd in the first innings here, and then backed it up with a big 100 in the second innings. I sense this 10 Test period against India or Australia, I reckon Ben Duckett's really ready to make himself a proper force in Test cricket.
I do wonder if he is also the player that actually most kind of mirrors the arc of Bazball, in that he's someone who maybe didn't quite have the kind of, or wasn't perceived to have maybe the ceiling of talent that a Harry Brook or a Joe Root or Ben Stokes had, but obviously has been empowered by this kind of all-out attack, the confidence they give him, and he has performed unbelievably well. But he also seems to be the one who's also taking this maybe slightly more sensible approach than maybe seeing now, perhaps both in terms of tuning down the Baz bollocks a little bit, but also in terms of the batting. And I just wonder if he is kind of the player who is most kind of, I don't know, Bazballian in terms of his whole approach, in terms of what he's been doing and what he is doing now and how the team is going forward. And it just seems his development and the team's development seem very much intertwined at the moment.
I mean, I saw him on his first Test series, his first Test tour actually in Bangladesh, and I remember that he scored a very fast 100 in the second Test in Dhaka when England were chasing, I can't remember the scores, but they were chasing a total. They lost that game. I think they lost 10 in a session to lose that Test match. But he showed in that innings that he had real talent. But he was playing in an England setup at the time that didn't really value that kind of approach. And he got this very unfair label of being a bit of a troublemaker off the field, which he wasn't really. He was just a bit immature. He liked to drink.
He was kind of a rough diamond, wasn't he?
He was a rough diamond. I mean, the first time I met him, I went to Wantage Road to interview him when he was at Northamptonshire, and it was the day of the end of season party, and they took me up into the office and they introduced me to Ben Duckett, who was about to go on an England tour, and he was dressed as a character from the Game of Thrones. Ahead of their pub crawl that night with a plastic axe and everything, and that was the kind of guy he was. He's such a friendly, sort of happy-go-lucky bloke, and yeah, he did have a few issues on that first tour to Bangladesh and India, and he then sort of got left out in the cold a little bit for a long time. And to be fair to him, I think his career could have gone in a different path. We could now be talking about Ben Duckett, the kind of James Vince style bloke who lives in Dubai and plays every kind of franchise tournament going, because that seemed to be the only route open to him, while England picked Dom Sibley and Rory Burns and those kind of guys. But fair to him, he stuck at it at Notts, and he ground out the runs in county cricket and took his chance. And I think what I like about Ben the most is that he's smart, he's intelligent, and he works things out. Now, he may come out with, as you called it in the Telegraph, Jake, Baz bollocks, which had E.W. Swanson spinning in his grave, but I'm
not sure a book of that title would sell particularly well. Actually.
I don't think it would. But the best thing was it wound at Rob Key, so that was well done to you on that one. So he does come out with the odd silly comment now and then, but he does learn from that as well. Actually, I think he's sort of toned that down and still remained a very interesting guy to talk to. And he just finds a way to score runs, and he's very, very consistent, and he's very level-headed, and he's very calm sort of presence. No, he's been a real find for Bazball, because, like you say, he knew Harry Brook was a great player in the making, but Ben Duckett, Oh, they took a chance on him.
He's also, what I find interesting about Duckett is he's a very un-English player in so many ways. He's kind of, he's not the MCC coaching manual. He doesn't look like that. He's bizarre. He's obviously, physically smaller than most, but and he just hits the ball in unusual areas. The way he played Jadeja yesterday was incredible. Really, just Jadeja can't bowl at him, really. I mean, he's trying to bowl outside leg stump from over the wicket, all round the wicket, and he needs 3 men at cover or 5 men behind square on the offside, because they just the reverse sweeps and the reverse the switch hits and all those kind of things just make him so difficult to bowl at. And you do know that if Jadeja did bring all his fielders over to the offside, then Duckett would just sweep him conventionally onto the leg side. You feel at times like he can open up so many parts of the ground with the sweeps that he's just impossible to defend against. Yesterday they didn't have a mid-off for most of the day when Jadeja was bowling. They didn't really have anyone beyond about cover point, extraordinary offside field. But I reckon Duckett's a big part of his development over the last year has been bringing in hitting down the ground off the spinners. He's used it really well in white ball cricket, and he didn't go there yesterday, I suspect because the rough outside is off stump for Jadeja was growing kind of by the minute, but he's got it in the locker now, which makes him so much more difficult to bowl to, and I'm sure at some stage in this series he will do that, probably in the first innings, and then India are going to have an even bigger headache. And they've got a bit of a Jadeja headache anyway, I think, but and a bowling attack headache. But Duckett he must be a captain's nightmare, and poor old Shubman Gill's in his first gig, and Duckett's there. He's got the brush out, and
the best thing that's happened to Ben Duckett, honestly, playing Indies, is that Ravi Ashwin's retired.
yeah, very true.
And we mentioned it at the top. Obviously, Ollie Pope's 100 in the first innings was absolutely vital to keeping in the game. It obviously came into the match under a lot of pressure with the Jacob Bethel situation going on. I mean, is that just a sewn up thing now that he is England's number 3 through to the Ashes? Is there any scenario where that now couldn't happen?
I never rule anything out, but no, I don't. I think he's nailed on for that job now, and I don't think this top. I can't see this top 7 changing, unless barring injury. Crawley. A lot of the noise around Crawley was generally outside the team, not in it. And what he did yesterday in their partnership, they're not going to break that up before the Ashes. Pope, well, if he does, if he tails away now like he has done in the past in series, then again he'll be back under pressure. But I think he's seen as such a. I think the support he has comes from Ben Stokes. Probably, I don't know, but I've always sensed it's more from Ben than it is from Brendan. So I think with that support, he'll be bedded in now for the summer, and he should build on this. Going to be playing on good pitches. He's got the confidence of 2 back-to-back hundreds. He should now go on and have the best summer of his career.
Yeah, there are runs to be had for England's top order this summer. As I said, with Bumrah, I'd be pushing him to play 3 of the remaining 4, but he might only play 2 of the remaining 4. Pope, as you say, this was the first time. It was a slightly bizarre statistic, wasn't it? That he'd scored 8 Test hundreds before this one, and all 8 had come against different opponents. And he finally got a second one against a single opponent. That was in the first Test of the tour to India last year. This one was in the first Test now. Both a nice statement start, and I remember at the time in Hyderabad, we were really confident that was going to be the kind of breakthrough moment for him. But this was kind of when he was going to really kick on. And while he scored 100 against West Indies, 100 against Sri Lanka, and he did play quite well in New Zealand at number 6 with the gloves, he still ended up only averaging 34 or 35 last year, which is his career average at that point, which is. It was just a truly bizarre year. A big part of that was the way he fell away against India. He can't let that happen again. I don't think he will. I think there's more to come from Pope in this series. Not because, mainly just because I think he looks different. I think he looks calmer. at the crease. He's coming out. He did speak about that on the after his innings, and it was kind of he said, well, there's nothing specific I'm doing, but we were all watching him last year, and it looked like he was going into Ben Stokes' kit bag and getting 24 cans of his sponsored Red Bull out and absolutely smashing that before he went out to bat every single time. And that doesn't seem to be the way now. He does seem to have calmed down. The 170 against Zimbabwe, a lot of people were talking about what the value of how much value you could put on that, and whether maybe even Bethel's contribution in the white ball series were just as kind of relevant runs. But it clearly gave him a lot of confidence. I think he kind of knew straight after making those runs that he was locked in to play against India. And it was such an important innings. And I do expect him to kick on this summer. As you say, the pitches should be great for batting, and India's attack might have a few holes in it.
Hi, Stuart Broad here. I really hope you're enjoying the Telegraph's Cricket Podcast, proudly sponsored by Laithwaite's Wine. Laithwaite's has an incredible range of wines, from big, bold reds to crisp, refreshing whites and everything in between. Perfect for any occasion, delivered straight to your door. And now my very own range, Beyond the Wicket, is available at Laithwaite's too. It's 6 great wines, 2 whites, 2 reds, a rosé and an English sparkling. Each inspired by my memories touring the world playing this incredible sport. Laithwaite stop at nothing to find the best wines from around the world. So, get ready for a great delivery, on and off the pitch. Visit laithwaites.co.uk and raise a glass to great cricket and great wine.
The next thing I was just very keen to get both your views on was, so Ben Stokes and decision making. There was a couple of interesting things I thought watching on from afar. Obviously, the toss was one decision that, was it ultimately proved to be the correct call? I guess is the question. Was this always the master plan to be chasing 370? I don't know what you guys think in retrospect on the toss.
Well,
now.
I think the ends do justify the means. England do know what they. I don't think it played out exactly as Stokes was planning it to. I think he was planning to bowl India out on day one, maybe for 300-ish. Not. Just because you bowl first doesn't mean you're looking to rattle through a team for 150. I think he would have expected India to get a score and get into the game, but he wouldn't have expected them to be 340 for the 3 at the end of the first day and then 430 for 3 in the morning session. But they did know that they could chase a big score. They've done it in a slightly freakish way where they've just mopped up the tail so quickly both times, and it could have been so much worse. It felt like India were on for 550, 600 in the first innings, and when Pant and Rahul were going nicely on the fourth afternoon, you thought, well, they can just easily bat England out of the game here. But they got the breakthrough and then managed to get rid of the rest pretty quickly. And they would have still believed if the chase was up to 400, maybe even 420, that was possible, as long as the kind of overs equation was all right and it was kind of maybe 100 overs. I think they would have been happy with that. I maintain that I understand why he made the decision. The statistics about Headingley, the statistics about his own team, the fact that he felt there was a bit of live grass and, that maybe there was a bit to be exploited on the first day that might not be there again on the second and third. I get all that. But and when he did say, oh, we'll have a bowl, I didn't think, oh, you absolute nutter. I was half expecting it, but it just everything pointed towards it being a batting day, and I think that would have been England's quickest way to get a victory in this game. I think on that first day they might well, they have the batting to have caused India some real pain. Maybe score 400 on the opening day, crush the spirit early on in the game. I think that would have been the quickest way into the game. But yeah, as I say, the ends justify the means. They got the win somehow, and I reckon people will be less quick to write this team off based on a day one following this. We've had a nice reminder. I mean, Holty and I have been joking all week. Hyderabad last year, we we wrote them off pretty heavily halfway through the game. They proved us wrong, and they've done the same here. So we'll probably be a bit more cautious around that one moving forward across these next 9 tests.
I know Jeremy, the producer, might want to get the violins out for this one, but the difficulty of being a cricket correspondent when you're writing a day's play is that you have to actually make a judgment on day one, and it's like a football writer having to make a judgment after 20 minutes on the game. So you've got to be, you are a little bit of a hostage to fortune sometimes. The Hyderabad one was one that will live with me for a long time. I think I described Tom Hartley as undercooked and over-promoted, which I think, Jake, you probably stuck in the headline, and then he took 7 wickets, and that was that one. And I think
that was a good team effort all round.
Good team effort, and the headline on the piece after day one here was Ben Stokes has his Nasser Hussain in Brisbane moment, which I did put in a lot more get-outs in the copy than that, but obviously that doesn't matter. So that's covering this England team. They do the unbelievable, and but I still think they should have batted first on day one. It was a batting day at Headingley, and I don't think India would have chased anywhere near the target that England got, that England managed yesterday. They're a very young team. We saw, obviously, the soft underbelly of their batting. And the reason England won this game is because India's tail was so poor. And I think Ben Stokes rolled his sleeves up and recognised that he had to drag them back in the game, because they didn't bowl that well on day one. They bowled poorly, actually. The best bowler in the game for England was Ben Stokes. He recognised that he had to be the one to drag them back in, and he bowled the best I've seen him since that test match in Cape Town, 3 or 4 winters ago.
Remarkably, the salmon fishing had got bumped off the TV channel for the climax of the game, actually. And so I did watch all of Ben Stokes' innings, and the persistent reverse sweeping out of the rough to Jadeja, I must say, found quite an odd watch, to be honest. Obviously, Duckett had shown, who is one of the best reverse sweepers in the world, that it could work. Felt like it wasn't really working for Stokes, and he kept on doing it and got out. And I had just wondered if England had ended up not chasing that down, whether or not we might be talking about that dismissal quite a lot. And I don't know what you guys made of it on the ground, of that kind of his innings.
Definitely, I mean, it was a bizarre watch. He actually said in his press conference afterwards that he'd spoken to Duckett at tea or one of the rain breaks to try and kind of get some tips on playing Jadeja, because Duckett had played him so beautifully. And Stokes is a reverse sweeper. He has done it for years. It's been an effective shot for him, but he's not as adept as Duckett. He hasn't got as much variety or deftness to his wrist work as Duckett. So I thought it was a slightly worrying passage of play, really. I would be stunned if India leave Kuldeep Yadav out in the next test for a variety of reasons. I think I suspect what they'll do, we were mentioning the long tail there, but I suspect they'll give up on that and actually make it even longer by bringing in Kuldeep for Shardul Thakur and just say we don't need runs from our number 8, we're not going to get many, so we might as well get some wickets out of him. And worth remembering as well, actually, that Kuldeep's quite a brave batter. He was Jimmy Anderson's 700th Test wicket, if I remember correctly, but only after a really long, quite stoic innings in Dharamshala. So he can do a job of that. Stokes, I suspect Kuldeep will have Stokes in a bit of bother unless he starts just trying to go downtown and hit him hard. Watching Stokes play spin in India and Pakistan last year was slightly painful viewing, really, for someone who at times in his career has just looked so dominant against spin and has scored, he has scored 100 in India in 2016 and looked a capable player of spin. That's kind of gone. He just looks like he's an LBW candidate all the time, and he camps back, and so he was trying to be proactive yesterday with a reverse sweep, but it just looked unconvincing, and it didn't necessarily look like the stroke for him. So that will be it's an interesting one to watch. It's also worth mentioning in the first innings, Stokes looked scratchy. He looked like a man who hadn't had enough batting. He had a very brief innings against Zimbabwe when kind of a work had already been done, and he was out for around 10. And that's his only innings since December, since his hamstring injury. I know Michael Vaughan's expressed a fair bit of concern about Stokes' build-up and how he's gone about it. He chose not to play for Durham even as a batsman just before that Zimbabwe game, and then he chose not to play for the Lions against India A between Zimbabwe and this Test match. I'm sure he'll be better for the run, but he just doesn't look in great nick, and he doesn't look like he's built an innings for a little while. He hasn't scored a Test 100 for 2 years. So it's a slight concern. I mean, the top 7, I agree with Nick that it is locked in. I think Jacob Bethel is waiting for an injury now, but Stokes is the only one to me who just looks like he isn't in prime form at the start of this Test summer. That may well change, but yeah, that's kind of how I see it at the moment.
What got England over the line, I think, really was their ability to blow India's tail away, which they did in remarkable fashion in both innings, and obviously Josh Tongue was very much at the front of that. Do we think that's a skill of Josh Tongue's, that he is good at bowling to the tail, or was this a bit of an unusual anomaly game?
It's too early to tell, really. I think we need to see him bowl at some better tail enders than those guys in the Indian side. It was some of the worst tail end batting I've seen in a long time. That's what you don't really get these days that often either. But he's quick and he hits a deck hard. He's got awkward bounce, so you can see why he does trouble tail enders. And there's a lot of talk obviously around Jofra coming back, and you would think it would be Josh Tongue that makes way for him, but he did as much as he possibly could, really. He played a part in the game to keep his place in the team. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit too early to say at the moment whether he's going to be the mop, as they call him at Worcester in Test cricket.
Yeah, I mean, his triple wicket maiden was bizarrely wasn't the first triple wicket over he's had this year. He had another one against Sussex's tail earlier this year. So I think he has shown a little bit of a capacity for it in county cricket. I actually found Tongue, I was quite worried about Tongue after day one. I thought he bowled really poorly on the first day, and I just wonder whether a bit of his early season rhythm had disappeared a bit. But after that, he was much better. He does bowl kind of hit me balls, but I think there's promising signs against the tail, and I think they should be persisting with him to find out as much as they can about him in that role, because it is something England have had massive problems with over the years. England kind of, for so long, 2 members of the attack were Anderson and Broad, and often the third member of the attack was Chris Wokes, which is another kind of similar kind of bowler. And English bowlers generally are geared up to bowl with a newer ball, whereas what they've built now is an attack which can work through the 80 overs of a ball's life cycle, but you'd say that all 3 of Bryden Cast, Josh Tongue and Ben Stokes can be proper old ball bowlers. It didn't necessarily help them on a flat pitch against some pretty good Indian batting here, but I think that is a pleasant development in the England attack, and some of the guys who will come back, Archer, Atkinson, you'd say can do a job with a new ball, but Cast also put in an encouraging performance with a new ball. I'd be going again with the same attack at Edgbaston, assuming everyone pulls up. There's a bit of noise around. I expect Jofra to be added to the squad, and there's quite a lot of noise around him going straight into the 11. But I'd be careful with that. I'd probably be looking either to get another game in his legs, or just to work with him during that Test match and make sure he's absolutely up to speed, and then kind of unleash him at Lords.
And then they've got choices at Lords, haven't they? Because they're expecting Atkinson to be fit for that Test as well. So if you've got Archer and Atkinson, that really does give them opportunities to freshen up attack, because you expect, obviously, Wokes will play at Edgbaston, so that he would probably be due a break then. So they will have options.
Would you neither of you would play Archer next match, and both of you would stick with it? And do you think that is what they will do as well, or do you think they will play him?
It's early doors.
They don't like breaking up Yeah, they don't generally like breaking up attack that's just won them a test match. And sometimes that's to their detriment. They pick players for too many games in a row. And to pick and plan their test matches is a little bit of a throwback to the way England used to do things. I know when Key came on last week, he was talking about it's actually about plug and play. They pick them when they're at their peak.
They have gone out of their way to talk about Archer and Edgbaston, is all I'll say. And maybe that's just a squad thing, and maybe they're being deft with their language. But Luke Wright has done it. Rob Key has done it. They didn't necessarily need to do that. To be quite, to be honest. So I'm slightly concerned that they will pick him straight away. But he's still got. We're at the time of recording. He's got another day's cricket for Sussex on a very flat pitch up at Durham. And then they'll need to see how he pulls up from that.
I mean, I think it seems sensible that they wouldn't play him, but how many times have England had Jofra Archer, fit and available for selection in a test match? And will that be too great a temptation to resist, especially when they can obviously manage him throughout the series after that? Just moving on to the Indian side of things. Now, obviously, there is a lot of positives for them. 500s in a test match in England is quite something. But it seems like there's quite a big gap between the top players in the Indian side and perhaps some of the other players as well. They've clearly got strengths. It feels like they've got a few quite obvious weaknesses as well. Bumrah was obviously superb in the first innings, but England did well against him in the second. There's been a lot of discussion about him being the best red ball bowler of all time. A lot of people say he's the best fast bowler they've ever seen. What do you guys think of that as a kind of discussion point? Is that fair? Is that do you think that's an accurate way to describe him, or is that a little bit of hyperbole coming in?
He's the best fast bowler, red ball bowler I've seen in journalistic career and before that. To average 19 in an era of covered pitches, playing 3 formats of the game, is truly the stuff of greatness. I don't have any. I can't. I think he is, without doubt, that leading bowler in that period of all time. I do recommend. This is so difficult, isn't it? Malcolm Marshall was obviously you would say we'd probably have had him before Bumrah came along. Marshall didn't actually have to play T20 cricket. He never had that opportunity. If he had, he would have been amazing, I'm sure. Then you go back to Fred Truman, Harold Larwood, those sort of guys, but they didn't play in Asia and they bowled on uncovered pitches. That's not to denigrate what they did, but they were of their period. They were the best. So, no, I definitely the number one that I've seen in my career.
It'd be the same for me. Definitely the best I've seen. I'd add that the thing I find most amazing about Bumrah is that he's, you said Fred Truman and Harold Larwood never had to bowl in India, but this guy's from India. Like that's where his home grounds are, and that is so many of the great Indian bowlers have been spinners. And Bumrah has defied the pitches he's grown up on to be a brilliant seamer in all conditions, every single condition. So he's truly a staggering record in Australia, pretty good record in England, although he has been involved in both those chases that they've gone mega in now. And it's just really special. I think that it's bizarre watching him because he's kind of got the tricks of a spinner and the sort of bizarre angle that comes with that and variations, but just the raw pace of a proper quick bowler. So he's unbelievably special. It's a privilege to watch him, actually.
The way I like to think about it, I think, is if you were playing a test match which was kind of conditions roulette and you had no idea what the surface was going to be, where it's going to be played in the world, and you had to pick a fast bowler to play for your team, I think you would always pick Bumrah because he seems to be so kind of almost ambivalent to conditions in his ability to make things happen and be good in all of those things, whereas certain other fast bowlers you might say are kind of better suited to certain things, and I think that is what makes him so special. I guess I think that slightly counts against him perhaps is kind of a relative longevity thing, but for fast bowlers I think it's slightly different. The greatest batsmen probably are all up in that kind of 10,000 runs club or close enough to it. But for a fast bowler to stay fit and take as many wickets as he has already, I think means it's absolutely a fair comparison and a fair talking point to me. I'm very interested in what you guys made of Shubman Gill's captaincy in his first go. Nick, you wrote ahead of the test that it doesn't get much more difficult really than Bazball has had a history of scrambling opposition captain's brains, captaining away from home. What did you make of him?
He's got a job on his hands to turn this into a team and not a collection of individuals, which is what it looks like at the moment. We can tell that by the performance in the first Test match. It was noticeable yesterday that KL Rahul was being very animated in the field and directing the field quite often at certain points in the game. I think he's got a lot to learn. I think his relationship with Gautam Gambhir is going to be fascinating to watch. He's, how can we put it, describe him as quite a punchy individual. He had quite a punchy press conference last night, which was he bit the head off an Indian journalist who asked him a very innocuous question about was he pleased with Rishabh Pant 200s, and he bit his head off at that. Was God knows what he's going to do if they ask him a difficult question. So Shubman did the best he could really in terms of leading from the front with the bat in the first innings. He played superbly well. It's a joy to watch him cover driving, and it was a superb statement innings from him and obviously from Pant too. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to gel that side together. Captaincy is never really about the decisions, the tactics. It's a little bit that, but it's more about how a player gets the best out of his teammates, and he's got some work to do there, I think.
Yeah, he's got some very, very special players. Like really top class, best in the world in Pant and Bumrah in their position. Then some outstanding ones like Gill, Rahul. But then a few holes in the side as well. I think it was fine. He did get Bazball a bit, and they did have some bizarre moments of passivity. If I was him, I'd just be unbelievably worried about how they fielded. It wasn't just the drop catches. There were heaps of them, and Jaiswal particularly. The ball was just following him around, and he just couldn't take a catch. Yesterday, the one off Duckett, he'd been sent out into the boondocks from gully and still dropped one out there. But yesterday the balls just were going through legs, and it could totally innocuous ones, but there was a one that became a three and a one that went straight to the man behind square on the offside and ended up going for four. And it was just in a run chase like that where every bit counts. And I think they were in the period of the game where actually it's kind of when Root and Stokes were batting, so it wasn't totally done yet. They just let themselves down massively in the field. England also dropped a pretty important catch from Harry Brook, and Jamie Smith missed a stumping. They weren't perfect, but that's the McCullum ethos, isn't it? That they absolutely charged every ball to the boundary and are pretty tidy in those departments. So yeah,
I think both captains fell in that trap, didn't they, by being a bit too funky and missing the basics and slip cordons and catches disappearing, opportunities being missed because they were trying too much at one time. But I think Headingley's that kind of ground, and that's what it can do to you. I don't think he Shubman really ever lost a plot in the same way that we saw Pat Cummins go that way at Old Trafford a few years ago. But that's because England played probably a much more measured game than they did in that game. It could still happen.
Feels to me as well that bad fielding has hired a new PR consultant, because there's been a lot of talk about how it's incredibly difficult to field at Headingley, and the drop catches were very explainable as well. So that's an interesting development. I'll have to keep an eye on that if that happens at the other grounds as well. What do you think India will do with their side for the next test then? Obviously, we've mentioned before, Shardul Thakur feels slightly like he's been carried in the side. Do they go two spinners? What do you think they will do?
I think Shardul will. I'd be surprised if he keeps his place. And as I said, I think Kuldeep comes in for him, and then they've got a decision to make around Prasidh Krishna, whether he stays. I actually like him. I think England would pick him as well because he's tall and kind of hits the pitch. I think he could be a bit of a handful on the pitches this series. as a kind of point of difference bowler. But the problem is he took wickets in the game, and he took important wickets as well. He also went about 6.5 and over throughout the game. So they do have a problem there. They have got some good backup options. If they wanted to go all in on a new ball bowler, then Arshdeep Singh swings it up top, or I think Akash Deep is a pretty handy seam bowler who might have a bit of wobble seam as well. So they have got options to kind of rotate their seam attack. Siraj, I thought he grew into the game actually. He was kind of a bit like Chris Wokes, where he's really poor in the first innings, but I thought he was better in the second. So I think I think he will retain his place. But whether any of them can play 5 tests, and they've obviously they flagged the Bumrah thing. Siraj is pretty tireless, but even he might not manage 5 tests. So there's going to be a bit of rotation and depth testing there, which will be interesting. And you just know that you sense that after a game like that, England will go really hard again at India's bowlers in the next game. I think Edgbaston's been a ground where they scored pretty quickly in the past, even against India. So I think they'll go pretty hard.
Right. Well, we will get onto your questions very shortly, but firstly, we want to introduce a new segment here on the Telegraph Cricket Podcast. It is our minute monologue, which will be more exciting than it sounds, I promise. One of us each week is going to, rant, rave, praise something over the last week that there's, really, really got them hot under the collar, a discussion point they really would like to talk about. And for the very first iteration of this, Will McPherson has something to get off his chest about Headingley, I believe.
Yeah, my minute monologue is on the lack of an Ashes test at Headingley in 2027. I'm just going to list a few names, a few years. Ian Botham, 1981. Mark Butcher, 2001. Ben Stokes, 2019. Johnny Bairstow, 2022. Mark Wood, 2023. Now, Ben Duckett, 2025. This is an iconic ground, and it simply must host an Ashes test in 2027. I don't want to get into the whys and wherefores of Southampton or any of the other venues. I would just say that outside Lords and Oval, which have long-term deals that automatically get me stage tests, this should be the first venue locked in, I think. Yorkshire have produced so many great players for England, including the engine room, the current middle order, and it's one of the most famous cricketing regions on earth. Headingley has heritage and history. It's one of the best pitches in England, and for reasons I can't fully explain, it routinely provides the most watchable Test cricket anywhere in the world. Finally, how much would the Aussies just not want to come there in 2027? England have won their last 6 tests there. Australia haven't won there this century. And I think it's a genuine scandal that England aren't going there for an Ashes test in 2027.
I'd have been much more impressed if you'd have done that in a Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, we should have got Jeffrey on to do it.
We should have got Jeffrey on to do it. I don't think he could limit himself to a minute though. But yeah, no. And the only thing I would say to counter-argue against that is that Bryant's chip shop up the road in Headingley is no longer there. So, which is where Shield Berry was as Bob Willis was running down the hill in '81. And having said that, Jeffrey's just emailed me. We'll see whether he's got a complaint about Headingley as well.
Right. Well, as Shield peels himself out from under the bus, we may as well get onto some questions.
It was 40 years ago. I think he's. I don't think the office can take him to task now.
All right. Well, look. Let's get into the questions now. Thanks again to all of you who sent them in. The first one today comes from Richard Pugh, who simply asks, "Has Bazball grown up?"
Yeah, I think it has. I think we've seen plenty of evidence of that so far this summer. And they said they were going to do that as well. They have listened, they have learned, and they had a long time. I think maybe that 6-month break after the Test series in New Zealand has been put to good use. These guys recognise, as Rob Key said last week, that this is a defining era, even if Ben Stokes won't admit it. And they know they should have won the last Ashes series. And that's hurt them, and I think, yes, they have learned and they are starting to grow up, or have grown up.
Yeah, I think they've grown up. I think also they're just benefiting from competition for places across the board. I think the looming spectre of Bethel has kind of helped sharpen the minds of some of the batters who they have been indulged at times in the past. They have kind of been able to have poor runs of form and get away with it. And you'd say that all of them are kind of responding pretty well to that. It's the same with the bowlers. No one really knows what England's best bowling attack is. Everyone would have a view, but if everyone was suddenly available for the 5th test of this series with which is what Wood has targeted his comeback. I think it's unlikely, but I think that has helped, and they've, there's been so much talked about this way of playing over the last 3 years and this group. So most of it positive, and the bits that have been negative will have, there's been fair criticism of this team, and I have sensed a little shift over the last 6 months that they are hearing a bit more, maybe acknowledging a bit more of the outside noise, and I think it's helping them. It was a, the kind of blood and thunder of some of those other extraordinary chases just wasn't really there in this one. It was just calm and collected, and it was a mature performance. They never lost their heads when India were 430 for 3 or whatever, and they never looked down in the field as well. As they are an extremely positive minded team. I know that sounds obvious, but they do have a knack of keeping themselves up and believing that a game is still there to win, even when it looks like all logic says it's not. So yeah, I think they have grown up, and at exactly the right time.
I'd say 2 things. One is the Jamie Smith dismissal in the first innings suggested there's still some way to go. He just hooked to 6, was taking on the men on the field, did it on the leg side boundary, did it again and got caught. And the second thing is we'll really know if they've grown up properly when the Aussies are pushing and pressing their ego, bouncing them and really taking them on and goading them. That's when we'll know when they've really grown up.
I think the other thing that will be interesting to keep on, which is perhaps getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but if England were to win, have the series won with a game to spare, or possibly even 2 games to spare, how they play in those matches as well, because obviously what they have not been good at is kind of, once a series is done, is kind of sticking with a more clinical brand of cricket, and I think that's obviously something that England fans have wanted to see a little bit more of. Okay, well, moving on to Alex, who asked, do you think India will change their Bumrah workload plans after the first test result?
I would say that there's always a chance there's a bit of kidology going on with this, although Gambia was very insistent that he's only going to play 3 tests, which means you would think he's not going to play at Edgbaston because he's not going to miss a Lord's test, is he? So I still suspect a bit of kidology there.
Yeah, I think they... I think you might be right, Nick, but I think they should be changing their plans. I think they should be, playing him in these first 3 tests and then seeing where they're at, assuming he is fit to play in both the next 2. I look at India's schedule, and actually, as important as Jasprit Bumrah's long-term fitness is and all those kind of things, in terms of massive assignments and kind of things that will really define this team, winning in England is a huge one, and what comes afterwards? Well, I don't think there's anything truly mega for them until the T20 World Cup next year on home soil. So that's quite a long period for Bumrah to recover from the. Obviously, they will be playing cricket in that time, and he would play international cricket in that time. But it was kind of legacy-defining stuff. I reckon they could push him quite a lot in this series to try and make that happen. And they'll be a very different looking side without him. So I'll be trying my best to get 4 tests out of him, strategically trying to get 4 tests out of him rather than 3. Obviously in Australia they pushed him through all 5 when he was carrying the attack, and it ended in sad scenes in Sydney when he was captaining the side and couldn't finish the game and had a kind of a back injury which kept him out for a few months. So I of course I understand their reasoning for being careful, but I would be, I don't think they should leave him out just because they, just for the sake of it. I think it just if he's fit to play him.
Feels like if they leave him out of the next test and they end up going 2-0 down, that will put them in an incredibly difficult position. Feel like a potentially a little bit of a waste. All right, and the last question comes from Samuel, who asked, after a lot of talk about Bashir's performance, who is realistically knocking on the door to replace him if needed?
Well, Liam Dawson, you would guess, is the second choice. I don't think he'll get a chance. I think Bashir will play every game this summer. I think he bowled pretty well at Headingley. I know his wickets were all caught on the boundary, and there was some suggestion that India were toying with him to keep him in the team, but it's like play Test cricket like that. That's just not realistic. His line was better, particularly to the right-handers. He seemed to have more flight and control. I didn't see any full tosses this Test match. So I think speculating or thinking about who's going to play in place of Shoaib Bashir is a bit of a waste of energy at the moment, because I think he's nailed on for that team for the time being.
Yeah, I thought that the toss decision was, of all the England players, is probably hardest on Bashir, because it meant that he didn't bowl last on a pitch that was doing a bit by the end, but wasn't. It's Headingley. It's not going to be really, really helpful for spin, even after a dry summer. And India's top 7 are all outstanding players of spin. So he had a really tough assignment. Shield Berry wrote about him after the 4th day and wrote a pretty positive, gave him a pretty positive write-up. I was also encouraged by the way Bashir bowled in this test, actually. I thought these 2 tests that he's kind of strung together looked better than he did last summer. When he lost his way in the second half of the summer badly, and then didn't bowl very well in Pakistan and New Zealand either. But I think he's had an encouraging start to the summer. You could look at it in another way and say, oh look, he bowled pretty well, maybe as well as he can do, and still only got 3 wickets at a cost of 50 each or whatever. But I think that's a bit cruel. I think he's developing, and I think he will remain in the side. I agree with Nick. Dawson is a viable alternative. He scored 100 in the Championship this weekend, and he's also, I think he's taking wickets at Chelmsford as well. So he's always going to be there for them, I think, and he's back in the white ball setup. I think he is it could happen. The other bloke is Jake's favourite, Rayan Ahmed, who also scored his 3rd 100 of the season in the Championship this week. He's not bowling very much still, but he never know. He could come into the picture. I wouldn't be totally surprised if he tours Australia as a backup spinner, and it might be that the change that's been made, that he's gone up to the top 3, means that his career path is actually becoming a bit clearer now, and that maybe when England are looking to balance a team post Stokes, that someone like Rayan comes into the equation. Maybe not in the 5, but at 6 or 7 around where the wicketkeeper bats. So yeah, that is a promising development, even though I'm actually talking about his batting, not his spin bowling.
I mean, I think everyone can see that Bashir's bowling development, I think, is heading in the right direction generally. I guess he offers relatively little with the bat and in the field, and the other alternatives, those 2 names you mentioned there, I guess, are more well-rounded packages, or at least starting to look like more well-rounded packages, which I guess is the only thing that could come into equation. But yeah, as an out-and-out spin bowler, it feels like there's not a lot of competition for him, really. Okay, well look, that is all for today. A big thanks to Nick and Will. Get some well-earned rest ahead of the next test match. A big thanks to everyone for downloading the podcast, and for those watching us on YouTube as well. The 3 of us will be back in 2 weeks' time to reflect on the 2nd test match. And in the meantime, head over to the Telegraph website, where you can read lots from Nick, Will, Michael Vaughan, Jeffrey Boycott, and all our writers. Well, thanks, gents. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Jake. Go and jump in a fjord.
Hi, Stuart Broad here. I hope you're enjoying a great summer. I'm here with Laithwaite's Wine, the proud sponsor of the Telegraph's cricket podcast. Check out my Beyond the Wicket range of wines at Laithwaite's, inspired by my memories travelling the world playing this incredible sport we love. Visit laithwaites.co.uk for more details.